Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest developments from Zimbabwe, where a national protest turned into a shutdown for citizens of the southern African country. A small group of disgruntled war veterans took to the capital Harare's streets on Monday, accusing Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa of corruption, economic crisis, and seeking to cling to power. The group, led by Blessed Geza, a veteran of Mnangagwa's own ZANU-PF party, called on the protests over anger at moves to keep Mnangagwa in power beyond the end of his term in 2028. Now, they demanded that the president step down from his position. However, only a handful of protesters took part in the planned march. Harare citizens largely opted to stay away rather than to take to the streets amid a heavy security presence. Anticipating possible unrest, most businesses, schools and vendors across the capital of Harare, as well as in the second largest city of Bulawayo and other towns, stayed closed as large numbers of police patrolled the empty streets.
A successful demonstration. Like I'm saying, there is no trust. It won't be a successful demo because people, they are just at home for their protection of their livelihood and their life.
I am surprised there are not many people in town, and I am contemplating going back to relax at home and wait for tomorrow to go to work.
A few small protests did erupt in the capital Harare. Scenes from the aftermath showed streets lined with debris and tires used to barricade roads. Police were seen clearing these objects after dispersing protesters with tear gas. Now, reports also suggest that the police have arrested 95 people on charges of promoting public violence during their demonstrations. But the protests still failed to garner massive support across the nation. Despite Geza previously calling for Zimbabweans to fill the streets in a final push to force the president to step down. At the heart of the recent protest is a reported plan by the president, who took over after a coup in 2017, to extend his final term by 2 years to 2030. Mnangagwa's second term expires in 2028. Zimbabwe's constitution limits presidential terms to 2 5-year terms. Despite a recent assurance from the president that he did intend to step down in 3 years, many remained unconvinced. Mnangagwa and his government have been accused of corruption and mismanagement that has left the southern African country in an economic crisis, while repression has weakened the political opposition. Geza and his group of veterans of the war that led to independence in 1980 are pushing to replace Mnangagwa with his Vice President Constantino Chiwenga, a retired general who orchestrated the coup against Mnangagwa's predecessor, Robert Mugabe. So while the protests failed to gain widespread support, they have exposed the growing rifts within Zimbabwe's ruling party and a deepening sense of uncertainty among its citizens. With questions looming over President Mnangagwa's future and a struggling economy, what lies ahead for Zimbabwe? Now, to discuss more on this, we are being joined by Boitumelo Ben Senokoane, who is an associate professor at UNISA and a political commentator from Pretoria, South Africa. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having invited me.
What does the low turnout for the national protest, despite the widespread frustrations, suggest about the political climate and public sentiment in Zimbabwe right now?
Look, the low turnout in any protest does not necessarily mean that people are disinterested. You know that protests have got several stages first, but secondly, there might be other ways of protesting. You might have silent protest, you might have people having stayaways. And the situation of Zimbabwe, you know that there is a rule by fear, a rule of fear. People will not necessarily want to go out there to risk their life. But it has been long that since we have seen or witnessed protests in Zimbabwe. This, as much as it might be seen as small, but it significant in a sense that people are still brave in the smaller numbers to go out there and challenge the status quo. So the low turnout should not be misinterpreted as people being satisfied.
Sure. And Professor, how significant is the role of the war veterans in this protest? And what does their opposition signal about the divisions within Zimbabwe's ruling ZANU-PF?
Look, it is very clear that the fall of Zimbabwe, or the new direction of Zimbabwe, at least in this current history or recent history, is that a new dispensation will mean the breaking into two pieces of the ZANU-PF. And it is very evident that what Blessed Geza is doing, he represents a certain faction within the ruling party, especially if we are made aware that he's a strong supporter of Constantino Chiwenga. And we cannot undermine the group of people that, especially war veterans. But beyond war veterans, you also get people within ZANU-PF supporting underground. It is for that reason you saw President Mnangagwa changing Chiwenga as a former chief of military and changing other critical position within his parliament. The reason for doing that is that he's no longer sure who to trust within the current people who are his ministers and stronghold. It is for that reason that he's trying to then rearrange to put those that they think that he believe in or trust.
And given the heavy security presence and the use of tear gas, how would you assess the government's approach to the dissent? And what are the implications for civic spaces and for democratic expression in the country?
Look, we agree that we've seen that the police are out there in full force, and military is also being put on standby. That is the response by the Home Affairs Minister has also declared that they will strengthen police or security within the country, but all ministries are preparing for that. What we need to take into consideration is that the response will be standard, and it's not only something new. It has been there before. It will continue to happen even today, where the president opt to use police and military where necessary to protect himself and to cling into power. So it's nothing really new. It has been expected. And of course, if he does not strengthen that, he will be out in power anytime soon. So he will try by anything necessary to stay into power to at least until 2028.
Professor, thank you very much for being with us on First Post Africa and for your valued insights.
Greeting you with aloha and namaste.
I love India.
Presence, occupation of a territory by another country pertains to India, what we saw in Kashmir.
The Prime Minister Modi. How do you see Trump's America?
Yes, the current administration behaves differently from the previous administration.
Are you saying that there are foreign powers who are trying to bring down the current government in Syria?
Exactly.
Iran, maybe Russia too.
Prime Minister Modi committed to South-South, cooperation.
Not over 50%.
Is Ukraine prepared to pay the price for that peace?
No compromises at the cost of territorial integrity and sovereignty.